Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and the third hour, of course, on Thursdays is the time we have Tim Alexander, Lord Sterling on, and of course his blog is Europe Business with 1s.blogspot.com. Tim, let's roll. We've got a lot of news to cover today, so let's review all this.
Yesterday it looked like there was a split between the chief of the IDF, Lieutenant General Bernie Glitz, and the Netanyahu War Cabinet. The IDF chief said basically that the Iranians are very rational people, that they're not developing a nuclear bomb, and there wasn't really a need to go to war against them. I don't know what hit the fan, but and what pressures they put on him. But this morning he comes out with a statement saying that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and other armies are prepared and ready to strike Iran's nuclear capabilities.
Yeah, but this, of course, has been echoed for years, not months.
Yeah.
How realistic is it? Because, firstly, they need to have the tankers in order to refill their jets to even do airstrikes. They, number one, need to get into the Israeli, from the Israeli to Iraqi to either Saudi Arabian and then into Iranian airspace. The Russians have put in a early warning system over Damascus and also over Iran. So I can't see how they're going to be able to carry this out, and they have no capability whatsoever of a ground invasion, zero, nada, and the Russians have already put their army on the northern border of Iran. This is pure craziness. This is just...
Well, the Russian RT, Russian television site, is saying that... there's a new deadline being given for Syria to stop all fighting, and that is May 5th, which is, about a week away. And that if it doesn't, that there'll have to be foreign military forces will have to intervene, and of course the French under the soon-to-be outgoing ex-President Sarkozy are insisting that if things don't immediately turn around, that we have the right and the duty to go in and invade Syria. Now, first off, of course, they're not going to turn around because the West, including France and the United Kingdom, the United States, the conservative Gulf Cooperative Council, Arab monarchy dictators, and the Mossad are right in there paying by the thousands poor Arabs to sign up as mercenaries, arming them, equipping them, training them, and sending them in to blow things up. And just today they blew up, it was an enormous explosion in Homs in Syria. And so, they're saying, if there's any violence, we'll invade. And, of course, they're creating the violence themselves. When foreign troops cross the Syrian border, I'm not talking about the terrorists, the so-called rebels, but when American or Turkish or what other troops cross the frontier, Assad has made it extremely clear that within a half hour he will launch his missiles against Israel, against American and NATO targets in the Middle East, and against the GCC countries that are involved in this.
And by the way, all our 13 permanent military bases inside Iraq are very close and very touchable targets by Syria. And they have access to global positioning system rocket satellites like the Faraj 5 rocket. So these bases and our military personnel are sitting literally on a hairpin trigger of war that could destroy them, and they may not even see these missiles coming in at thousands of miles an hour, and bam, they're gone.
If they have a warning, it may literally be
seconds,
120 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's hardly enough time to get to bunker, much less really do anything. We are in an insane place. We've been here for quite some time. It doesn't seem to be getting better. And you're totally right about the Russians massing on the northern border and everything else. but that doesn't seem to be stopping.
And it doesn't even stop them when you have this meeting in Turkey and the Iranians say it's anti-Islamic too. Now, whether they're lying or not, first off, it means that Iran is probably at the point where they're going to allow the observers to actually watch what they're doing. In fact, they even said they'll let other countries determine how many curies of radiation, of radioisotope 20% enrichment.
To a large extent, they already did this. I mean, they were prepared to ship the stuff overseas and all. Look, this is not about some mythical Iranian nuclear weapons program. For one thing, 20% is one heck of a long way from the 90-some% that you have to make a uranium-based nuclear weapon. They know that. We know that. This is all nonsense for public consumption for people that don't read, don't think, and are gullible enough to buy what other lie they float down the street.
And never went to a physics class or understand any science.
Well, and don't want to. But the point is that regardless of what the Iranian and Syrian side does, says, is willing to do, is willing to compromise, has done, the globalist and the Warhawks in the United States, in France, in the United Kingdom, in Israel, and in the Gulf cooperative states, they don't want a compromise. They don't want a solution. They don't want peace. They want war. And the insanity about it is, well, there's many different aspects to insanity about this.
Right, exactly.
But the Iranians and Syrians do have doomsday weapons, and they're the type of weapons that you use when you think that your culture, your many thousands of years old civilization is about to be destroyed, and then you release self-replicating DNA genetically engineered viruses on your enemy, knowing well that they could come back and kill what's left of your people, but at least you will kill them. That's called MAD, mutually assured destruction. It is mad. It is very much a form of modern insanity, but it's what I, for one, I'm 61 years old, have lived under my entire life with the Soviet Union and the United States. I mean, we came very close in the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah, you and I both grew up with duck and cover, right?
Yeah, duck and cover, exactly. Get under your desk, Johnny, because that flash is about to go off and all this. Well, we didn't go to war with the Soviet Union over Cuba, thank God, because President Kennedy had some sense and because people on both sides had some sense. But the scary thing, ultimately the scariest thing about all this is when you know all this stuff that's out there, and they're still charging. They're still charging on. Bibi Netanyahu and Lieberman and Barack, these idiots, they got to have this regional war because from their little tiny Israel, they want to dominate the entire Middle East. They're so arrogant, and this Yiddish Eastern European criminal ghetto culture that they have, they can't back down, and they've got to have the upper hand, and they've got to rule everybody, and they're so racist about it. Everybody else is a two-legged, soulless animal. This will get them killed. It will get us killed. It's insanity, and they own our politicians. And if you think Romney's going to be better, well, I'm sorry. Romney's not going to be better. Obama's not going to be better.
I said we had a discussion with this in the last hour, and I said, look, tongue-in-cheek and being honest about it, if we vote for a third-party candidate, we'll probably guarantee Obama. If people just blandly vote for Romney, you may get a lot worse than even Obama, because Romney has proven already with his record. The only way we can vote for Romney is we hold our nose if he makes public statements to agree to have Santorum become Attorney General and take over the personhood issue. Ron Paul or a designate becomes the head of the Federal Reserve, and Newt Gingrich or someone with two clues actually becomes the Secretary of State instead of a maniac like Hillary Clinton. Crazy. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and lots of news to cover. Pretty remarkable, actually, and let's get into some of these things. And I want to pull up some of the latest reports, but let's go through your news first, Tim.
Well, there are 5 new lies the Federal Reserve is telling the American public, and this kind of ties in also with a story from the UK saying that the United Kingdom is now slipping back into a double-dip recession. And you just got to love the mainstream news media. I mean, they couldn't tell you the truth if their lives depended on it. If anybody thinks that what we're in now is just some run-of-the-mill slight recession, I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. I mean, how dumb can you be, okay? And they've lied to us and lied to us and lied to us. Then now things are getting so bad. Well, now they've got to lie to us some more and say, oh, well, we were in a recovery from the recession, but now it looks like we're going back into a double-dip recession. Like 53% of college graduates don't have jobs or are only working part-time jobs that have nothing to do with their college degrees. The working age people in the United States, something like, I think it's 57% are not working full-time jobs, but yet the Federal Reserve and the federal government tells you, well, unemployment is down to 8%. I teach, and I teach mostly young people in college, and I feel so sorry for them because they can't declare bankruptcy to get out of their student debt. The economy, when I first got out in 75, when I first got my first degree, I got out, and the economy was terrible. I stayed in, got my master's. But this is tenfold worse than then. I mean, I know I have an idea what it's like, but these poor kids to go through college, to pick up a 4-year degree or a master's or a doctorate, and then you can't get a job, and then you have bill collectors hounding you, and if you get a job at McDonald's, they'll slap a garishima on your wages for that little tiny bit of income because you owe, $20,000 for this wonderful degree, which you can't get a job. Well, why can't you get a job? Well, let's see. They've closed 50,000 big factories in the United States over the last handful of years and shipped the production to China and other third world countries. That might have something to do with it. We've gone $17 trillion into debt just refinancing the global banksters. Actually, it's a lot worse than that.
It's a lot worse. Actually, the total number I heard behind the scenes is somewhere between $700 to $800 trillion. And the total debt is so large that even multiple Earths could never pay. Makes me choke when I even think of it. It's like, oh my gosh.
Well, and then you've got what do they call it? It's a 1.5 quadrillion. The obligations from the serialized fraud, basically. I mean, they have buried us deliberately. But let me tell you, we can get out of this quickly. Hitler got his people out. Now, Hitler is a monster. You'll never hear me say a nice thing about Hitler, but you do. Even the devil, I guess, gets credit where credit's due. He turned Germany around from hyperinflation to the most prosperous country in Europe. And basically he did that by shutting off the spigot from the Central Reserve bankers who put him in power. They knew they wanted him to do it because he was working towards a war, which they wanted. He created a new form of currency, and we could do much the same. You have, I think it's 218 million people, something like that, who are over 16 years of age in the United States. If you gave everyone, or at least they say everyone over 18, a debit card for $40,000 or $50,000 with the following restrictions: you can't spend it on food, you can't spend it in stock market, you can't spend it on real estate. No need to inflate those worthless bubbles. You could spend only so much on a car. The rest you just, clothing and other items, refrigerators and whatnot. But all those things have to be 100 made, manufactured, and assembled in the United States by Americans using American parts, American labor, American materials, shipped on American trucks, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you would say, well, how could we do that? The factories are all gone. Well, yes, they are, but the factories would come back real quick if you had all those people sitting with that money. That amounts, by the way, to less than 17 trillion. But that would jumpstart prosperity in America instead of flushing untold trillions down the toilet so these evil global banking cartel jerks can get all the money, and then they demand austerity fascism. I linked an article yesterday on my news blog, Europe, about an elderly black woman in Detroit. She's getting a gun permit. She says the hoodlums around her house are so bad, if she has to, she'll take one of them with her. Right now, in the last year, legitimate murders, that is, legitimate killings, self-defense killings, have increased in Detroit by 73%. They've cut back on the police department so much. They've gone from 5,000 officers down to about 3,000 officers.
Wow.
The last time this lady called 911, they came the next day.
Well, I guess you know what they came with, though? See if you can figure it out, what they came with.
A farm to report her death. I mean, I don't know.
They did that, but they also came with flowers. To put a wreath on her grave.
On her grave, yes. So we can give, the latest round is we're going to give Israel another $800 million for their Iron Dome because they won't get along with their neighbors because they want to keep stealing land from the Arabs and keep getting into wars. We'll give them another $800 million. We've given them several $billion every year. We've spent 4 times just on that little tiny country that we spent on the entire U.S. space program. But we can't provide enough police or teachers or sewers or anything in this country. The country is literally going to hell. We are become, and this was an article I linked about a week ago. Some fellow came up with the idea. He says, America is the world's first fourth world country. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, he said we are formally a first world country, but things are extremely corrupt, at the top. We don't have the petty corruption that you find in the third world country. If a cop pulls you over, you don't offer him $20 if you to get out of a ticket. Chances are, if you do, your butt's going down to the WHO scale for attempted bribery. Whereas in Mexico or someplace you try, well, sure, give him $20. He'll pat you on the back and thank you. Drive careful. Well, we don't have that, but we do at the very top in Congress, in the administration, in the Supreme Court. It's totally corrupt. And it's disgusting. And you're seeing much the same thing around the globe in the major country in Europe. This is why, in the Netherlands, we'll come back to this one after the commercial.
Yeah, that's really important. We want to open up some other cans of worms here. What's going on with the disaster that is not Chernobyl, Fukushima, and why we've only started to see the beginning of the disaster. And the same with Macondo, and we want to revisit that right now. Welcome back. I want to revisit a couple of different issues they're coming up in the last few weeks, and people need to grasp how bad it is, because they're not going to hear this in the regular news. The first one is Macondo. Macondo, it means in African language, from the Ivory Coast of Africa, it means the devil's food. And it was warned since 1951, 1 year before I was born, that they should never drill there. They were warned several years before not to drill there by the drilling company was hired by British Petroleum. Then after the disaster occurred, their main thing is to hide it. And they continue to use Corexit. People don't realize this. 2 years after Macondo, they're using Corexit, which was an Exxon product. The EPA is the only product that they're authorized to use, which is incredibly environmentally toxic. It's banned in most countries in the world. There is a Oil Eater 2, which is a product that's available, that's been used in 18,000 oil spills worldwide, including by 5 different divisions of the U.S. military that use it regularly, and it's safe and non-toxic. You just simply spray it on the oil, and it decays it, it gets rid of it.
But they don't use it because Exxon is the manufacturer corrects it.
Right, and what happens is, it's like you said on the break, Tim, you said it very well, and why you repeat this, because what it means is corporations not only set the tone, they actually control the puppeteer of the Congress, the Senate, and the President. They write the laws just like Israel writes our foreign policy. Companies like Exxon actually
write our oil policy. The pharmaceutical companies write our pharmaceutical legislation. Big agribusiness writes the agricultural laws. Israel writes our foreign policy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get to, how about the American people? How about America, the country? Well, that doesn't matter, you see, because we're not slipping, us, the public, we're not slipping, when's the last time you made a $50,000 donation to your local congressman or senator? I don't, and even if I had the money, I'd be damned if I'd give it to those crooks. I'd take it out and have a bonfire with it before I would do that. And I think most people feel that way. Okay, well, we're not, but the big corporations and the Israel and all the rest of them are doing that. And we've now become this fourth world country where at the very top, it is totally rotten and corrupted. And it kind of goes back to some of the stuff I teach about ancient Rome. Rome was in many ways a very evil, immoral, pagan institution, but yet the old Roman farmers and the Roman Republic that the Roman Empire was based on, they, in their own way, had a pretty strong moral code, and in their own way, they were very conservative. And Julius Caesar, for instance, was killed on the floor of the Senate because he wanted to return to a lot of that. And one of the emperors whose name escapes me was just off the bat, he was also killed because he was trying to turn things around. Eventually, what happened in Rome is people stopped thinking about Rome and purely start thinking about the people in the Senate, the people in control, what they were going to get. There was a mindset for many, many years in Rome, and it's kind of like the mindset we had in this country, because when I went to school, you had the stories, George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, and he told his dad he couldn't tell a lie. Well, a lot of that was very hokey, but the point was we were taught that we had a civic duty and a civic responsibility to America, and that percolated up. Yes, we always had crooks in Congress, of course, but there was a certain mindset that you don't do some things, and you do take care of the country, and that is what has been lost. It was lost in the Roman Empire, and when it was lost, the whole kit and caboodle eventually fell apart, and that's where we're at now. These clowns in Washington, they don't care about us. If they did, they would have fired TSA a long time ago. They're still groping children and old people in airports. Every week there's another news story about some horror that TSA has done some little kid or some 80-year-old lady or woman or man or something, and every week the fascism gets worse. We now have over 7 million people in jails, and now we have corporate jails, for-profit prisons. We have more people proportionally in prison than Stalin had, than Hitler had, than the Soviet Union had, than Communist China had or has today.
Exactly.
And that's outrageous.
It is. Want to go back and visit some of these issues that people don't understand how bad it is. And I posted up some of the articles as to why the Fukushima disaster, the Macondo disaster, the financial disaster in Europe, which is, by the way, now almost certain that by the summer Europe will crash. We are now seeing literally an extinction level event happening in the Gulf of Mexico when the media and the government, including Obama and the EPA, are trying to tell us everything's fine when we're having...
Don't eat seafood from the Gulf.
Right. Here's the point. We're having now fish with sores all over their body, crayfish and shrimp and dolphins. Their legs and arms fall off the shrimp. We're having baby dolphins born without eyes. We're seeing now in the Pacific Ocean, because of the disaster there, it says bitterness. It's not just the bitterness of the Corexit and the oil disaster. They literally do the Corexit so that most of the oil will sink to the bottom of the consistency of Vaseline a mile down. at the Macondo drill site. This thing is now many hundreds of miles long now, and a giant glob down there. It's disrupted the loop current. We've talked about this numerous times. It's not coming back. That's why our seasons are all mixed up. On top of that, we now have the poisoning of the Pacific Ocean. And what's different about this disaster and any other nuclear disaster in history, the Chernobyl disaster blew the debris apart. It didn't have it fall together and form one big glob. Now what's going on is they had reactor number 3, which is the MOX reactor, was almost certainly a zirconium-triggered hydrogen explosion that compressed the corium, the material, after the water was gone, and actually created a nuclear explosion which blew it many miles away. So if the entire plant goes...
The penny count, the penny pinchers, because, and let's face it, this whole, the bit of using uranium to boil water is insane.
It is.
Because that's essentially what they're doing to turn steam turbines to create electricity. But we have not dealt with the problem of what do we do with all this stored fuel. Now, yes, we use some in nuclear weapons, but there's so much of it.
Oh, listen,
so we keep
they'll
it
tell you
on
positive.
site.
Well,
in
listen.
These ponds.
Well,
I have is 100 times worse than the reactor itself. The reactor is a sealed containment vessel. The ponds are basically these giant ponds up high that have
100 feet high.
Them.
Yeah. Now, let me explain and finish this. It's important that people understand this. We're not seeing the end of this. This is not like something happened March 11th, and now it's over, and the little kids are back in a prefecture next to the exclusion zone, which is only 12 miles. The level of cesium is now so high, hundreds of miles away. There are now, radioactive, dangerous levels that are beyond limits that we can't even imagine. The amount of cesium and strontium in the area of the Fukushima prefecture is already 33 times higher than the alienation zone around Chernobyl, 25 times higher in northern Tokyo. What's going to happen when this whole thing falls together is it's not only creating what's called hydrothermal volcanic activity, which is creating these jets that are literally tunneling out miles out into the ocean, miles into the land, is that it's going everywhere, into the water table, it's venting off in the air, and as soon as any of the water gets down...
the waters will be made bitter.
Right. What we're seeing is
out of the Bible.
The amount of nuclear material there, just in cooling pool number 4, is equivalent to making, at around 10 to 12 pounds of plutonium per bomb, 92,000 bombs. That's only one cooling pool. There's 7 cooling pools and 6 reactors there. And it's so radioactive now, no human being can near it. Now, I just got called the other day to do a conference on this, and I laid out and I want to review it as to what needs to be done, and these have to be done. Number one, they should have put a corium catcher underneath it, which means even drilling a quarter mile away and shove in containers that are lined with depleted uranium and create a catcher to catch the corium. Number 2, they needed to put a seawall up. Number 3, they should have put Kevlar spider silk tents over it and used charcoal, HEPA, and buckyball filters to get all these radioisotopes so they're not being spewed into the air or the oceans. They need to put in cable robots or radiation-resistant robots like the IEEE Atmel robots. None of these things are done. This is a global disaster, and it's going to get a lot worse before it gets catastrophic. And we're back live, and one of the things we put it up this week because we want people to be aware that there's several consequences to this. Number 1, don't eat the seafood in the Gulf of Mexico. Be very cautious to get a radiation detector. We're posting up now all the detectors. I'm making a new sub-website with all the best radiation detectors. You can get them at Nutrimedical.com. We now have the Expector EXP, which is the best one. It's $780 with a special radiation detector hand. I imagine if you walk into your fish store, your grocery store, and check your food with the radiation detector, and it goes click, 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 and goes 2 or 3 times background, you need to back away from the seafood counter. Now, the second thing is you have to understand that this is going to bioaccumulate. The nori, which is the seaweed that is made in the south part of Japan, is now double the level of radiation it was a few weeks after the Fukushima Daiichi problem. This disaster. The likelihood is, with the amount of material we're going to be seeing in the future, hydrovolcanic and nuclear explosions. And we now know that there's evidence that MOX Reactor 3, the entire top of the reactor is like a shotgun aimed up in the air, the hydrogen explosion triggered a nuclear explosion. It wasn't a symmetric one like we do when we make a typical nuclear bomb. It was asymmetric, but it's a nuclear explosion. And we're going to see these now, and these could become multiple, and they could be very, very big. And it's not just the explosion, it's a debris cloud that'll go around the world. It's a local spread of pieces of nuclear rods that can go 60, 70, 100, 200 miles. It's nanoparticles that will circulate the planet. And the fact is, what we're looking at, 2, 3, 5 years from now, the bioaccumulation, it will be very difficult to find what's called radiation-free food, not just in the northern hemisphere, because in 2.5 years, the radioisotopes from Fukushima will be in every ocean on Earth. 2.5 years, and I'm saying this like, the prophet Joseph, at the time of the 7 fat years and lean years. When we started with Macondo 2 years ago, we started into the lean years. We ended up with the seafood destroyed. Now we have 1 year later, the disaster last year of the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. If we don't see that this is the Chernobyl or the bitterness in the oceans.
Well, here's part of the key problem is they never told the public, and the public was never led to understand that these nuclear reactors weren't just reactors. What they were, in far, far, far more dangerous than the reactor itself, was the fact that they were a dirty fuel rod storage facility.
Well, the rods are even more dangerous than when they're fresh, because the longer they live, they make more plutonium, more heavy isotopes like americium. They make more tritium. And the fact is that as you generate more and more tritium, you slow the neutrons, you increase the chances of a chain reaction. We're going to have zirconite hydrogen reactions, nuclear explosions. And what I say is this is not the end of the beginning. This is the beginning of the end. With
104 nuclear reactors in America, and 75% of them are on fault lines.
Right.
Now, what happens, like, say, the new Madrid Fault, if you have a major earthquake that cuts off all your natural gas and electric supplies?
Right.
Assume, and it's a heck of an assumption that's probably nowhere near valid, but assume that the emergency generators work and are able to keep water flowing over these
and how much do you think they're going to dump into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean? They've already announced this from TEPCO. How much per day are they going to dump of highly radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean?
It's a
this
big
besides
ocean.
The stuff that leaks. 1,000 tons per day, and that's in addition to the ones that are actually created spontaneously by the corium, because God knows where it is. It could be 100 yards or 100 meters below those reactor buildings, creating hydrovolcanic vents that can go for 10, 20, 30 kilometers out of the Pacific Ocean or under Fukushima or down to down near the train stations.
Concentrating a naturally occurring substance, uranium. We spent billions upon billions of dollars to concentrate it into some of the most lethal material on the face of this earth. And then now we don't know what to do with it, and we store it all at these sites, and it's the pools of the stored material that are what's so incredibly dangerous, and they have to be constantly aerated with water. Water has to flow over them to cool them. That requires a major pump. That requires electricity. And yes, you have diesel fuel generators and diesel fuels on site that will keep them going for weeks, but eventually these diesel generators aren't meant to be, perpetual. And that's assuming that everything works just right, which we found out at Fukushima, that maybe things don't really work when you have a really terrible natural disaster. So the point is, where you have multiple Fukushimas across the United States potential, and all it takes is one really bad earthquake in the center of the United States, and boy, we are really
we had the San Jacinto.
We
had the San Jacinto upthrust zone, literally 5 miles or less from the San Onofre reactor. We have a tube design on the reactor, and I posted up the websites. I've talked to Chris Harrison to get other sources. The tube design was defective right from the beginning. The Hitachi company that makes the tubes is only on the hook for $134 million. Each steam turbine costs $600 million. They've asked to try to start turbine number 2 with defective tubes and just to block them. And luckily, Darrell Issa, who's on the financial committee here for the Congress, has said, you're not restarting it. And they realized the people down here, they're going to be a rally on the 29th up at the plant, which is on the anniversary of Chernobyl, and recalling 25 years of Chernobyl, which means, of course, bitterness. Disaster, but that's minor compared to this. This is an open nuclear sore that's going to continue releasing radiation around the world, and it's going to bioaccumulate. And what I've said before...
It's a type of cancer that grows.
Right. Now, here's the consequences to it. Number one, we're heading toward an option where we have two very bad options in terms of who will be president. Romney may be able to be... chained if there's public statements that he'll have the person who'd issue dealt with. They'll strike down Obamacare, which, by the way, they based Obamacare on Romney Care. He's going to have a hell of a time convincing the public that Romney Care wasn't the basis for Obamacare. Then we've got a situation where if Obama's gone, we've got Hillary, who's even potentially worse than Obama. We've got Romney, who's a high-level...
Just because she rides a broomstick doesn't mean she's a bad person.
Yeah, right. And then we have the situation of the meltdown of Europe, which is now virtually guaranteed with the fall of the Dutch government, the fall of Sarkozy and Merkel. We now have Russia and China...
The Europeans are saying no to the global banksters.
Right. And what's happening, basically, is there will probably be meltdown of the world economy by this summer. There'll probably be evidence that there'll be increasing explosions in Fukushima. So if you don't get food supplies aside, and we put the Ready Store back up on our website, we've got a radiation kit, which gives you 2 NIOSH N95 masks to get nanoparticles, 2 Nutridyne, 1 Nutritrel, and 1 Nutridefense for chelating isotopes. Please get these things now. Please get your food supplies. Please get seeds. Get a concealed carry permit. Get yourself ready, because it's better to be ready a year early or 2 years or 5 years early rather than a day late. What's likely to happen is we're going to be in a war situation. They're already saying that Iran is trying to recruit to try to hack into our infrastructure. We know that the Blue Army in China has already done it over the last 3 years to hack into our infrastructure. We know this is not a proxy war with Syria and Iran. This is a war with Russia and China. These are not pushover nations. This is going to be really ugly, and it could destroy most of what American civilization is. If we
and like most wars, it's totally unnecessary. Ultimately, it is
no, not necessarily.
demonic.
In fact, we're natural allies of the Russians and Chinese. We should be natural allies. We should have a Trans-Siberian pipeline for gas and oil. And what will happen is, as we, in a sense, provide them technology, education, etc., they'll walk away from the extreme elements of with the old guard, and that's why the fall of Beaujolais is a sign that China's ready to throw off the old communism. We're seeing the same with Russia. Russian citizens want to have the ability to drive a good car, write with a good pen, have an education, have a warm house, have more than just some sausage and borscht in their refrigerator. They want to be able to eat normal, healthy food. They want all the Russian girls not have to sell themselves as foreign brides to Americans and Europeans and elsewhere. People don't understand just how bad it is in other parts of the world unless you go there. They have no idea, do they?
But it's coming that way here.
Right. No, what I think will come here is Americans are the scoffing of the world. And if Obama or anyone else, including Romney, decides they're going to start taking our guns, they better bring extra body bags, not only for us, but for them.
Amen.
Amen. And our God is God. Jesus Christ said, if you don't have money for a sword, go and buy one. And by the way, Jesus is a man of peace, and so am I. But when there's nothing left but judgment and all the grace and all the mercy is gone, believe me, the wrath of the righteous is far more dangerous and vile and just devastating to the evildoers than helter-skelter of those who are satanically energized.
Amen.
That's what's coming. America better wake up. Worldwide, you better wake up. Get yourself ready. Food will be radioactive. Worldwide, economic chaos and more. But we can repent. We can turn it back like the Ninevites.